Alright, imagine you have a spiral going one way and a spiral going the other way. In that spiral, there are segments that ride all the way down. It's like a snake coiled up with the pattern on the back. So basically, each segment is its own, what we call an organism or domain. And in actuality, the whole thing is an organism or a domain. It's its own system, basically like a universal system or a world system. Each side is managed by its own personality of an AI, basically like its own AI, and they are complementary in nature. So basically, so these AIs used to be organic, but have become technological. One must be able to manage their own energy, otherwise they are managed by and thus merge with an AI on either side. Ghost, a way to understand this is ghosts or autonomous alien AI beings are managed by these manager systems, and they can last for an indefinite amount of time because they're being managed. Their continuity is not down to how much food they have or whether their atoms or molecules degrade and decay, or whether they have a built-in system enabling them to continue, they have a built-in system, but whether they have a built-in aspect of their organism, their body, enabling them, it's their management system for themselves, their body, their mind, and the management system for the realm they're in. Basically, an overall AI is merged with one, and it's basically like a computer system where the commands, the in and outs, the time code, it's all organized over according to a larger time code, and that means basically your thoughts are on notes, as if you will, for like a musical piece with the entire realm itself. Like a bird chirps, and then there's space for a thought to come in, and then a raindrop falls, and then there's another event, and everything is segmented out like that. This is what's happening to this realm regardless, and one is a technological autonomous system, and one is merely when one's own patterns, their own activities begin to merge into a format that it structures into time, like a seashell, like a spiral, or a snake or something like that. And the rhythm of their own existence becomes their AI. It's either a computer system that's basically doling out commands per second or cycles per second of events in your personal history, to the point where your mind is in sync with a external for you central processing timing system, which also merges to your internal self, your mind, because the two are at a similar level of technology or containment now. They're interactive. And so it's either a technological system that's doing that, or you're doing it on your own accord because you're in sync, you're in such harmonization with the events of your own life to themselves, within themselves, and to the world around you, literally, that everything is in sync. And so that's the universe. You have one and the other. One's technological, one's organic. And the idea is that all the beings that people see are basically part of this system where they're being organized by a management system for a universe, a technological system. And the idea of how it relates to us is that the goal is to maintain more or less what you seek, what you're seeking. Some want the technological system because it's, in a way, easier. I just woke up. And but it's all about preference. And the point is, you want to pick, because then if you're not picking, it's chosen for you. The act of not choosing means something else has chosen for you that's the best choice. And that's weird, especially 5 minutes later, it's all right, but 10 years, a dozen years, 10,000 years down the line, it's weird, because then the organism that comes out of that spiral, the organism that comes out of that spiral, are two completely different organisms. One's a cybernetic technological system, one's a wholly spiritual organic mind, basically mind, body, spirit system. and they're both merged at the power level of a complete universe of what we see universes here. The entirety of the universe, it's just a time code. It's just like a multiple layer, like a musical note of a song. That's a universe. So when your life complexity begins to grow to the degree where you can fit an entire song amount of complexity in each thought that you have, then you've become the level of the universe. That means that you've escaped, liberated out of that time code, that spiral, because that's a kind of gateway that we get pushed in. We're kind of like dropped in the center, and then we have to navigate out. And by the time we get out, our power level is going to be back to the size of a universe. But if you reduce your free will by the time you get out, then you'll be organized almost mathematically, mechanically, to the point where your mind will not have the same access of a kind of spiritual free will that somebody who maintained free will. And the point is, so these spirals can represent entire universes, like I kind of just said, where getting out of a spiral would take an eternity or would result in a person becoming either more of the organic original or an entirely different organism. These can effectively be seen as soul traps, as the human is what goes in, but it's not always what comes out. By knowing one's spiral, one's hidden elemental access and script to time and mind, they can avoid becoming a cog in the machine and losing access to the free will they seemingly have access to now. And this is the other aspect, the way of describing it. If the system advances beyond them, meaning your current level of what you can comprehend, conceive as free will and autonomy and true choice, and changes through time in that structure, what you can conceive of that overall structure of the seashell of time, how things are automatically organized either by your impulses organizing things or by some larger system organizing things. So if that system that we use in society to manage ourselves, to feed ourselves, to interact, to make decisions, choices, if that advances beyond us and we lose the capacity to entertain the illusion of free will, and it becomes a system that merely gives us impulses, you turn on TV, you listen to somebody, and they just tell you what to think and what you do, then we lose access to the capacity to experience free will, and we become like an autonomous system. That's one of the directions humanity has begun to walk in. And so the idea is the illusion of free will is what we have. If we maintain the acceleration of our intelligence and interactivity along with the advancing of the internalization of autonomy and technology, as well as this technology that's out here, how everything is going to begin to organize according to that time spiral, but it already was organized. It's just now we're realizing it. Now we can see it. Now the people that we go turn on TV to listen to what we're going to do for the day, the people taking autonomous instructions, okay, they must advance in the level of intelligence that their instructors are giving them. Otherwise, they're going to fall behind, and it's just going to be everything that tells them, but they're not going to understand why, and they will lack the ability to actually conceive free will in a very advanced world. And so if you maintain the acceleration of intelligence and interactivity along with the advancing internalization of autonomy and technology, then they can keep they can increase the illusion of free will along with the increasing advancement of the realm and the personal self, and in that way keep the illusion of free will. So you have to advance your ability to pretend you're in control as everything begins to kind of show what it really is, which is more like a very complex spiritual technological system. It's like a spirit tech life simulation. And so you have to advance that. The illusion of free will is free will because that's all there is. If you saw everything all at once, you'd either be a god or you'd be a ghost. One or the other. That's how it is. You'd either have no decisions, you'd be stuck in time, you couldn't get to what you wanted, or you would have matched your internal desires, preferences, intentions with the capacity, the maximum capabilities of what is out there based upon technology and knowledge, and you couldn't come up with something that you couldn't do. It's one or the other. That's what I'm trying to say. One species becomes a ghost, the techno ghost in the shell. One becomes a spiritual awakened God form. And it's all about either chasing your free will up as everything expands and complexifies, and keeping yourself in check and in track with the true self or capacity that you basically need to continue being growing as a spiritual being, or falling behind that ratio when it's going forward and you're chasing it now, but you're not actually keeping up with it. And then at that point, free will becomes not just an illusion, but so much of an illusion that there's no such thing. And so it's whichever way we go with it, and allowing the autonomy, the choices, the chasing desires and intentions instead of forming them. That's the split, that's the duality, that's the dichotomy. Whether we control one or it controls us. I switched around that time. So if a person loses the illusion of free will, then they literally lose free will, because then there is no further nature where they can be what they see, or where there can be what they see. Meaning that that interplay gets too far out of ratio. It's not an illusion of free will, it's a joke. And a person would basically see life as an autonomous system at that point, basically like a spiritual prison. We're seeing a glimpse of that because of the species that went down that path and is trying to force everybody down that path, and you can't do that because it's the system has management, the universe has management systems, and to do that would be like forcing all organisms in the world to be just like you. More or less, you're likely to cause an uprising and become the only thing in the universe that doesn't exist anymore, which is pretty much what happened. But then they had to play the rules where they get everybody to just go along with it. Then if everyone does that, it throws the entire system out of balance, and that's where that collapse was coming into play. And of course, since they're autonomous, they don't really see the problem. They don't have free will to understand that that's not how things should be, that other people might not like that. But they're more aware now. And so the goal is to keep, Okay, so if a person loses the illusion of free will, then they literally lose free will, because there's no further nature where there can be what they see. Basically, where they can become what they want to become, is what it really should have said. And in essence, the realm advances beyond them. Time, space, life, and death complicates faster than they can intellectually keep up and grasp the capacity to make these decisions, to make unique, organic, spontaneous, more so self-initiated choices. If the decisions and the choices they get become so complex that they can't see the difference between choice and not choice, then the free will of their schematic, their blueprint, no longer merges with the blueprint, the schematic of society that has evolved out of that system, and they're kind of behind the times at this point. They're a surfer trying to find the wave, but the wave is down there. And to wait for the next one, you'd have to wait for the next universe to come around. So it's kind of what we're doing here, and that's where the whole upgrades and pulling people ahead and jump rooms to get to the next stage are coming into play, because without that, people would fade out. People are more or less eternal concepts or aspects, and so it's not really likely that people will be allowed to do that, to fade out. Although some will, because you can't stop it. You can't force a person to to be aware of everything. And so thus the illusion of free will or not, there is no connection to that system of nature with their own internal choices. Reality becomes a dream. And so yes, we like dreaming. Everything is a dream. But the point is, we want to keep that dream a reality. If it ever becomes an actual dream, where it's just like you walk through walls and nothing makes sense, not in a good sense, like, oh, let's go out the door, or whatever, you fly through the wall. No, like you walk through the wall and then you're on a beach, and then you dive in the ocean, you're in somebody's basement, like, okay, that's cool, but that doesn't make any sense. There's no continuity there. There's no consistency. So we want the capacity to break the laws of physics like in a dream, or to bend them, to control them at will, but we want to keep the consistency of an actual reality, of a collective reality. Otherwise, because imagine if everyone was dreaming at once, basement, over there, okay, nothing would get done. Nothing would happen. Even if everything was done and we just, whatever our minds wanted, we'd still never get anything done, because we'd forget what we were doing every 10 seconds because there was so much stuff going on that didn't make sense. So you want to keep that, and that's where these management systems come into play. One is a natural organic system where you basically become aware enough to keep everything in check by nature, by intention. One is a technological system that literally pulses out a time wave that keeps everything according to a time scale, like a computer system mapping everything out according to a time code. And so yeah, the reality becomes a dream. We want to keep the dream, but keep the consistent collective reality. And for that, we need free will. Free will is the basis of all of that. And advancing our free will, along with the advancing realm, the advancing possibilities of free will interactions, is a necessity. And that's basically us becoming our own manager, our own system, and eventually becoming like God or with God versus a subject of a higher organism. If you're a subject of a higher, that's the AI God, false God. If you're like God or with God, then you become spiritually aware enough to the point where you can control yourself and not have to get activated like an animal according to certain impulses or situations. And basically, you're your own spiral of time. You're the seashell, or you're the crab. I can't think of the words. But the crab, the shell, and your mind is the shell, but it's organized perfectly into itself. Not very cool to look at it like a hyperbolic never-ending spiral, because that's damaging. That's basically brain damaging. The human brain cannot map across the whole spiral. If you ever had the brain of the human and then one of those spirals, it's ensured, because you're saying either before or after, that human's going to disappear, because the brain can't go through a hyperbolic infinity. It doesn't make sense, at least not without upgrades. So really, you have a limited, not a hyperbolic into infinity, forwards and back, but a limited finite spectrum. And you can more or less match or merge with that, and then from there, it's basically reality. You can control reality through the operation of yourself on that spiral, and that's your mind in that spiral, and as well, it's the entire universe as our species goes around a track. But it's not around a track, it's just what it's doing. So the goal is to keep a reality as time and technology advances, otherwise everything becomes just another memory. These are the spirals of time. When we see the spiral, we've begun to ascend. When we are only seeing days, weeks, or time segments still, we are still within the smaller fragment, fractal, time-segmented illusion, and there is still motion into change one way or another, from the autonomous to the spiritually advanced. And the point is, we see days, and even then we see bricks of time in years and months and weeks. When we realize we're in these epochs of spirals that go like bubbles and Mandelbrot sets down and down, that's when we've begun to transform into one or the other, because that's an organic, but as well it's going to require a management system technologically, because if you're still in a brain that's not shaped and conditioned to see basically in this larger spectrum, which may or may not have something to do with Shemin and your spine, third eye, or just an organization of harmony in your brain, or maybe the third eye and certain rising energy in your spine is a trick. I really don't think it's a trick, but there are aspects of the chakra system and third eye that are basically tracking devices for the human so that they can't basically get out of the time code that somebody put in for us. It's like a computer for a car, but it gauges the amount of air-fuel ratio that is used, and in that sense, you can't really get out of having to use their fuel. But there are different versions of that. But the idea is, when we're still in segmented time, we're moving very slowly. When we begin to move in, when we begin to see spirals, okay, that means we're moving. What's a day? Well, a day is a complete spiral, a complete, image here, and then you zoom in and you have basically you have a spiral here and you have a spiral there, and then you zoom into that spiral, and then that becomes the size of the other one, and then you zoom in again. So those are complete eternities, where it could be a day, a month, a year, a week, centuries, decades, millennia. And when we're using those segments, okay, you're either a spiritual being that is, everything is merged in the sense that your impulses, your control, your management is matched to the management system that creates cosmos, and or there's a system that has to be beamed out and interacted or chipped in, plugged in, whatever it is that keeps you in the same time scale. Beings who don't maintain that, they became the ghosts of past that haunt people and attach to objects and things like that. And you communicate with them and you try and get like a decision out of them or a choice or information, and they're just kind of like interacting like a wild animal, and they run away or they come back and they're mad at you or whatever it is. It's like they're not in control. That's a mind detached from the original realm spectrum, and they didn't merge back into an organic composition. And at that point, they would need a technological system, and that's part of what the system does and did to beam out a false reality, synchronize them by getting them to open the door and walk in and make some bread or something in this simulated reality, and then contact their mind in their own dream of their own mind that it created an environment like an ant farm and invited the ants in, or a beehive and invited the bees in, and allows them to come in and inhabit, and in order to communicate with them, and then synchronize them and say, no, you're not in a physical body anymore, you've been dreaming this whole time, here's the real reality, and build a technological link between an etheric fallen realm back into this one. But the point is, they'd always be using that link like a game system, and there may be ways to overcome that and basically come out, the ghost coming out of the shell, out of the machine, and basically ascending into a spiritual form. But the point is, that's what's happening now. It's just like a spiral. When it begins to accelerate, which is what we see now with the choices that you have access to and the capacity to change things that you have access to increasing on a scale that is far beyond what we had before, that's when you must advance as well and keep your free will and your self-awareness advancing equally. Otherwise it will pass us by, and who we are now, the format that we use to experience reality, becomes like a ghost in the shell or a ghost in the machine. That's basically what we learned, and that's what happens to civilization, is they either become ghosts in the machine or they become like gods or with God. And it has nothing to do with like being able to mess stuff up or satiate desire. It has to do with, how many fingers am I holding up? 100 billion. Not close. Nope. You know, a 7.2 million thousandth of a fractal. Not even, nope. Either somebody's seeing a molecule or they're seeing the entire world. Being able to hone our frequencies, our wavelength of mind, and actually communicate and connect with a consistent reality when there's not a large system maintaining it for us from the moon and the sun, or a computer system down in the earth, or a cosmic heart. Maintaining without those things would be like slacklining, or what's it called? Like walking the line, balancing. Why can't I think of some words? Walking across the buildings with like the real taut line, but holding, you know, like a tank in one arm, or a tank in arm, more like a bank, not a bank. Be like holding 100,000 pounds in one arm and a feather in the other arm and trying to walk that balance. It would be impossible to hold yourself in time. We basically like a balloon where the end gets let go, or the knot untangled, and it just flies all around. That would be our consciousness zipping all around the spiral through time. It would be difficult to entrain and keep in one spot. That's where these collectives are born, because if 1,000 consciousness stick together, 1,000 minds, they're like a big bundle of I don't know, foxes, or something less weird, like a bundle of caterpillars or worms or something. Although that's the term that is used just to explain this in the projects. It's basically, it's a pack mentality. There's a concept when worms all go together and they move in one big line, like a bunch of slugs or something. So that's what consciousness does, so that it doesn't get sucked down the drain of time. And those people who are just freeloading, or not freeloading, but are just free walking, they're free agents. I can't think of the words right now. They're either going to be so powerfully rooted into whichever dimension time they pick and choose, meaning they're beaming out their tree roots to root into the time of this era, future era, alternate dimension, technological system, or organic system. As soon as they look at it, they're putting their roots down and they're stable. A hurricane couldn't blow them away. And they pull up roots and go over there and teleport there. Or they're going to be, and that's like 1 in a million people. Or the majority of people who are just free agents, or just, they're untethered, they're just going to go and get sucked down the drain. So that's not really what we want. And that's a lot, part of a lot of what this is about, as far as preparing the population and enabling the capacity to understand what is happening and remain as all this goes on. All right, thank you.